Hello everyone, myself Salwa, Assistant Professor in Medical Laboratory Technology Unit at Yenepoya School of Allied Health Sciences, and I'll be talking on the topic standard precautions. Let's look into the specific learning objectives. So at the end of the session, students should be able to enumerate various components of the standard precautions, categorize biomedical waste, and as well describe appropriate disposal methods. They should also be able to demonstrate correct hand hygiene, PPE donning, as well as doffing and spill management. Now, before we move into the standard precautions, we should know why these precautions are necessary. If these precautions are not followed, what will happen? So there are chances of hospital acquired infection. So what is hospital acquired infection? It's an infection which is acquired by the patient in the hospital. And there are certain criteria which has to be fulfilled to be called as a hospital acquired infection. That is, the patient has to be admitted for a reason other than that infection. The infection should not be present or incubating at the time of admission, and these symptoms should appear at least 48 hours after admission of the patient to the hospital. It also includes those infections where the symptoms will appear after the discharge from the hospital, but again there is duration. For example, for catheter associated urinary tract infection as well as central line associated bloodstream infection, the symptoms should appear at least within 48 hours, whereas for surgical site infection it can range from 30 days to 90 days based on the type of surgery. So how do they get these infections? Like, what are the sources of infection? It can be endogenous as well as exogenous. Endo means within, that is from the patient's own microbial flora. For example, during the insertion of a urinary catheter, if proper precautions are not followed, the microbial flora which is present on the perineal area, perineal skin, can ascend along with the catheter and cause catheter associated urinary tract infection. The other source of infection is exogenous source, that is through the environmental sources, maybe from the hospital surroundings, healthcare workers as well as other patients. For example, maybe from a contaminated ventilator or from the hands of the healthcare worker who could be an MRSA carrier. So what are the different modes by which it can be transmitted? We know the sources, we need to know the modes of transmission. So mainly in the hospital acquired infections, the mode can be contact as well as inhalation. So we know the source, we know the mode of transmission, so that way it will be better to know how can we prevent these infections. So preventive measures are broadly categorized into two: standard precautions and transmission-based precautions. Now, what are these standard precautions? They are a set of infection control practices, and it has to be followed when care is provided to all the individuals, all the specimens, as well as all the needles and sharps. Well, what are the different components of standard precautions? We have biomedical waste management, hand hygiene, personal protective equipment, spillage cleaning, as well as respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette. Moving to the first one, which is biomedical waste management. How a biomedical waste has to be managed. So what is this biomedical waste? Any waste which is generated maybe during the diagnosis or treatment or as well as in research activities, and these waste, they contain the infectious and hazardous materials, maybe some sharps like needles or broken glasses, as well as harmful chemicals. So what are the different types of waste which is generated in the hospital? It can be a general waste, pathological and infectious waste, chemical and pharmaceutical waste, as well as sharp waste. So how are these waste managed in the hospital? So there are different steps. The first step is waste segregation. Now, wherever the waste is generated, for example, in a hospital we have multiple floors, multiple wards. So wherever the waste is generated, it has to be segregated then and there into different color-coded bins based on the type of waste generated. And if there is any liquid laboratory waste, it has to be pre-treated and then only discarded. Now, from the generation side, that is from multiple floors, each floors, that is where the waste is generated, it has to be transported to a central storage area in the hospital. So all the waste from all the floors, they are collected and it is stored in one central area in the hospital. Now, from that storage area, it has to be transported to a common biomedical waste treatment facility, and that has to be located within 75 kilometers from the hospital. And then in that treatment facility, based on the type of waste, it is treated and then it is disposed of, so that in order to prevent any transmission of the infection. So here we have the flow chart as well. And how do we segregate the biomedical waste? So we have 4 color-coded bins: red, yellow, blue and white. So what goes into the yellow bin are infected plastics like syringes, gloves and any other plastic waste, maybe the urine bag as well. And what goes into the yellow bin? Infectious non-plastic waste like anatomical waste, soiled waste, cytotoxic laboratory waste, expired and discarded medicines. And what goes into the blue bin? Glasswares, any antibiotic vials as well as implants. And what goes into the white bin? We have the needles as well as broken glasswares. Now blue and white both have to be puncture proof as well as tamper proof containers. Next component of standard precautions is hand hygiene. Now the hands of the healthcare workers. Now most of the procedures which we do in the hospitals are with the help of our hands. So hands are most probably or most likely to be contaminated. So these hands of the workers are healthcare workers are main sources of transmission of infection. So it is very important to follow proper hand hygiene to prevent the hospital acquired infection. So there are different ways we can do. The first one we have is the hand rub, which can be alcohol based or maybe chlorhexidine based. The duration is 20 to 30 seconds. That is the contact time. That is the minimum time which is required for a disinfectant to be present on the surface of the skin in order to kill the microorganism. So for a hand rub, it is 20 to 30 seconds. Now what is the advantage of hand rub is that after contact, it can evaporate on its own. Now, when do we use a hand rub? Maybe during routine patient care activities or while taking rounds. Next we have is the hand wash. We can use an antimicrobial soap or any ordinary soap and water. Again, the contact time here is 40 to 60 seconds. And then we have the surgical hand scrub, which contains 4% chlorhexidine. Duration is 3 to 5 minutes and it has to be performed before any surgical procedure or also in between the cases. So 5 moments of hand hygiene. So which are the situations where these hand hygiene has to be followed? That is before touching a patient, before any aseptic procedure, after the procedure, after touching the patient, as well as after touching the patient's surroundings. So these are the moments where hand hygiene has to be followed. So we have 6 steps of hand washing, where the first step will be to use the soap and then rub the palms of your hand together, and then you use rub each palm over the back of the opposing hand with the fingers interlaced, and the third step is interlace your hands and rub the palm together like this. The fourth step is interlock your hands and rub the back of your fingers onto the opposing palm. The fifth step is to grasp your thumb with the opposing palm and rub. And then the sixth step, with the clasped fingers, you should rotationally rub each hand onto the opposing arm. Moving to the third component of the standard precaution is personal protective equipment, where it is used to protect the skin and mucous membrane of the healthcare workers from exposure to blood as well as body fluids. Now it just not protects the healthcare workers, it also protects the patient from the healthcare workers when any sterile and invasive procedures are done. So we have different types of personal protective equipments here, like the gloves, heavy duty gloves, surgical mask, N95 respirators, the head cover, face shield, goggles, shoes, plastic apron, gum boots, shoe cover, linen gown as well as coverall. So all these come under the personal protective equipment. So moving to the first one, that is the gloves, where these gloves will protect both the patient as well as the healthcare worker from exposure to microorganism. For example, if the nurse is a carrier or she has the MRSA on her hands, and without using the gloves she has attended the patient, so there can be chances of the MRSA being transmitted from the healthcare worker to the patient and can lead to hospital-acquired infections. But if the gloves were used, the transmission would have been blocked then and there. Now there are steps of glove donning. Donning means wearing the glove. So first step is to perform, whenever any personal protective equipment has to be donned, the first step is to perform a hand hygiene, and then with the touch only the top edge of the cuff of the first hand and don the first glove. So once you've donned the first glove, then with the bare hands, not with the gloved hand, with the bare hands, you'll pick up the second glove and don it as well. Now how, after the procedure, how the glove is doffed, that is removing of the gloves. So you have gloves on both the hands. So with the first hand, you will pinch the edge of the gloves near the wrist, and you will not touch the inside of the glove, just touch it outside of the glove and pull it off like this, doff it like this. So in this way you have the glove in the removed glove in the gloved hand. You have the bare hands here, you have the gloves here, right? Now with the bare hands, 2 fingers, you're going to slide it into the second glove, such that you do not touch the outside of the glove, you touched only the inside of the glove and pull it off. Now this way you have both the gloves in a single hand, and then you discard it into the appropriate color coded bin, and then hand hygiene has to be performed. Then we have the surgical mask as well as the respirator. So respiratory, when do we use this? When we know there is a risk of transmission of the droplets as well as aerosols. So there are 2 types, surgical mask and respirators. Now what is the shelf life of a surgical mask? Is only 4 to 6 hours. That is, if it becomes soiled before 4 to 6 hours, maybe even after 1 hour of usage, it has to be removed then and there. You should not wait it to complete 4 hours and then only discard. If it becomes soiled, maybe after 1 hour, it has to be disposed of, or even if it is not soiled, it has to be disposed of within 4 to 6 hours of using. Now once you've worn the mask, you should avoid touching the front of the mask, as that area will be contaminated. Mask should not be worn with beard and unshaven face, because it can create gaps, and hence the protection will be much lesser. Hand hygiene has to be performed before wearing the mask, as well as touching and doffing the mask. So how do you wear a mask? What are the steps of mask donning? So if you have the straps, you pull the straps tight like this, right? And then you pull the lower part below the chin, and then the nasal bridge. You need to press on the nasal bridge so that it is sealed tightly. How do you remove the mask? With the straps, you just pull it off like this and discard it into the bin. Now if you've used a mask which has straps, the tying strap, then the lower strap has to be removed first and then the upper strap. Because if you remove the upper strap first, what will happen is your mask will fall off, your clothing will get contaminated. So make sure that you remove the lower strap first, then the upper strap, and then with holding the strap, it has to be discarded into the color coded bin, and then hand hygiene has to be performed. Respirator or the N95 mask, it is designed to protect the wearer from airborne microorganisms like M. tuberculosis. So N95, N in N95 stands for not resistance to oil, and 95, that is, it has the ability to filter 95% of the airborne particles. Now once you've worn the N95 mask, a fit check must be performed to check whether the mask has sealed properly, so that it can allow only the clean air to enter and protect you from the contaminants. The fourth component under personal protective equipment, we have the protective body clothing. So it is worn when you know that you could be exposed to any blood or body fluids. So we have the laboratory coats, plastic aprons, disposable gowns, as well as coverall. Then we have the protective eye or the face wear to protect the mucous membrane of the eyes, nose, as well as mouth. So it's worn when there are procedures which can generate droplets or aerosols. Then we have the head cover and the shoe cover when the spillage of blood is suspected. So shoe covers include surgical shoes as well as shoe covers, and gum boots. Gum boots when you know that there could be a sharp injury. Donning and doffing of the PPE. So there is an order where you order for donning and doffing of PPE. So when you wear the PPE, the gown has to be worn first, then the mask, then goggles, and then the gloves. While removing, the gloves has to be removed first. It is going to be contaminated, so that has to be removed first, then the face shield, gown, and the mask. Now mask, if you, for example, you're working in the OT, the mask should not be removed there. Once you exit the room, only then it has to be removed, because there can still be airborne pathogens. The fourth component of standard precautions, we have the body fluid spill management. So if there is any spill in the hospital, how do we manage it? So the first step is to assess the situation. So once you get to know there is a spill, you need to know what kind of spill, whether it's a small spill, whether it's a large spill, or what has spilled, whether it's blood or body fluid, or whether the thermometer has broken, right? So that is how you assess the situation. And then you protect yourself. You need to wear the personal protective equipment. And then the third step is to cover the spill. That is, there's a spill kit, and the spill kit will contain absorbent pads. Now those absorbent pads should be placed onto the spill so that it absorbs it, and then you apply the disinfectant, right? The disinfected time, contact time should be at least 10 minutes. So for 10 minutes you have the absorbent pad, you have the disinfectant. So once 10 minutes is done, you clean up the spill, and then again you decontaminate the area. You again apply the disinfectant to remove if there is any residue, and then all the waste is disposed of according to the biomedical waste management and even the PPE. And the last component we have is the respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette. So these are very important because, as I told you all, the major sources of transmission of hospital acquired infection in the hospital, right? They are mainly by contact and by inhalation. So respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette is very important because it can protect from the droplets which is produced maybe by coughing, sneezing, talking, or breathing. So how can you protect yourself? When you cough or sneeze, you cover the mouth and nose, use the mask, and if you've used the tissues, you need to properly dispose it off, and then perform hand hygiene, as well as if you know you're having any infection, it is better to maintain physical distance. Moving to the summary, hospital acquired infections are infections which is acquired during the healthcare and it can be prevented. And hand hygiene is the most effective method to reduce infection. Appropriate use of PPE will protect healthcare workers as well as the patients from exposure. Proper biomedical waste disposal and body fluid spill management will maintain a safe healthcare environment. These are my references. Thank you.